Civil rights movement in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're talking to Professor Gloria McKissack. And of course, Professor McKissack, we promised that we'd give you an opportunity to talk about some of the most notable characters that you might have met during the civil rights movement here in Nashville. And I think that you indicated that you knew both Dr. King and his wife. Why don't you talk about those individuals and how you met them within the range of the civil rights movement?
Okay, well, there were a number of people that I met at that time, but living in the moment, I didn't know their historical significance, and they became icons in the movement. Dr. Bernard Lafayette, for example, is a good friend of mine today. John Lewis was active in the movement. Of course, he's a congressman now, so they were just other students, just like, you know, myself. The movement brought a lot of important people to Nashville. Some I was conscious of their importance. I remember when Sidney Poitier came to Nashville to support the movement, and I got to meet him and talk to him. He was very personable. And Ralph Abernathy and Stokey Carmichael. I belong to SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I still have my pen. So I came in contact with those people. Martin Luther King, I was involved in the march in Detroit, which preceded the Great March in Washington, D.C. in 1963. And thousands of people marched down Woodward Avenue to the Riverfront Cobo Hall to hear King speak. And you couldn't get inside of the place, and we were on the lawn trying to hear him. And I remember so distinctly Dr. King saying, "I have a dream, I have a dream." I couldn't make out much more, but I heard, "I have a dream." And of course, later in my studies and time, I realized that he gave that speech prior to his Washington speech. And when he was in Washington, he was giving this speech, and someone kept prompting him in the background, "Tell him about the dream, tell him about the dream," because he hadn't even planned to say that. So his real "I have a dream" speech was actually said in Detroit, Michigan, and I wonder what would be the significance of the speech and so forth if he had never said it in Washington, D.C. But I remember that very clearly. My contact with Coretta Scott King came many years later. I was selected to represent the state of Tennessee and work at the Martin Luther King Center for Social Change in Atlanta. They selected one educator, or sometimes two, from each state, and I was the one from Tennessee. And I worked with Mrs. King and his sister, Christina King, and others to develop a national curriculum guide based on his strategies and his philosophy for nonviolence. So I had close contact with her. I remember when she came in the room, and we were in her board room, and she walked in there, and it was just like an angel had appeared. She just had such a charismatic, she's just a beautiful woman. And so I worked on that curriculum guide there, and went back several times to develop that guide.
So Dr. Lewis Baldwin, of course you know Dr. Baldwin, mentioned this curriculum, I think, on a number of occasions when we had him on the show. And so you actually participated in helping to build this civil rights kind of curriculum that Dr. King, that I think was pushed all across the nation.
Yes, it was a national curriculum, and when I came back to Nashville, I used to give workshops on Keynesian nonviolence and introduce that into the metro school system, and it became a very intricate part of my teaching. Every student I had to learn the steps for conflict resolution, and I bet if you met one today, they'd be able to give you those steps and how to use them.
That was a very, very important part of it. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Dr. Bernard Lafayette. He gave us Dr. King's principles on nonviolence at one time, and I would imagine those are the same.
They're all intertwined together. So that was one way that the movement had an impact on my life as an educator. I was able to become a part of curriculum guide writing. and then to influence the young people in the school system.
Well, now you were in Tennessee when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968.
Yes, I was.
Now, why don't you say something over the last 4 or 5 minutes that we have in reference to that? Because I try to at least elicit from all of my guests at least some statements in reference to that. But what impact did that, after having worked in the movement for a while and having perhaps not worked directly with Dr. King, but certainly been influenced by Dr. King. What impression did you get in reference to that? I mean, what happened that day?
It was devastating. The first devastation came with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and it was one thing after another. But it was like I had lost a member of my family. It was like all hope was gone, and where do we turn now? And can it get any worse? And I remember the troops in Nashville. I was living in College Hill at the time, had a little apartment up there, and I had to catch the bus, the Jefferson Street, to get from work home, and they would not carry us beyond Fisk University. So that's a long walk from Fisk
to College
Hill. And when I finally reached the TSU campus there at John Merritt Boulevard, they had barricades up, and the troops were there, and I just remember how angry I was, and I said, I've got to cross over. I said, I'm going home, but they thought the students would, you know, break into violence and, you know, have riots, and there were riots and things that occurred across the country, but Nashville remained relatively calm and in mourning. It was a sad event. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the many things that happened during that civil rights movement. A lot of folks lost their lives, and I think that in your case, you were one of the fortunate ones because many people were unable to come from that movement. You see,
yes, that's true. One thing about the movement is when you decide to make a difference, you have to commit yourself. And part of commitment means struggle and sacrifice. And you have to be willing to sacrifice. And some people sacrifice with their lives, unfortunately.
You know, I think that's my interest in this whole movement now. And I've said this on a number of occasions, that the civil rights movement, we were in Hope, Arkansas at the time, simply passed us by, in the sense that while on the campus at A&M College in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, only 15 or 20 of the young people would go down and sit in and etc. And I think that many of us were sort of embarrassed to the point of us not going and feeling somewhat ashamed, and in a real sense, it's a sad thing to say, we ridiculed them because we felt that they didn't understand the power and the wrath of the white man once he became enraged over what was going on. And so there was a lot of fear at that time. That's one of the things that we remember. And I always say that individuals who had an opportunity to participate in it, and I had an opportunity to do so, which is to say that I would have faced expulsion from college and et cetera, and et cetera. But I was not willing to take that chance at that particular time, and I say that individuals like yourself and others who, and especially those who gave their lives, really owe a special debt of gratitude. We all owe a special debt of gratitude to have push you forward, you see, while we stood back and in many instances ashamed of ourselves and ridiculed you. That's essentially what we did. You know, you must be crazy and etc. You had to be,
Yeah,
it was a real challenge because there are lynchings and burnings and all of those things were going on.
But the thing about it, again, I'll repeat this, that all that was going on, and we were called communists and all kinds of things, adversity, facing adversity. It made you strong, and God was with us. And when you feel that God is your shield, you can do anything.
And of course, Dr. King was right there supporting that position and pushing that position.
It was a Christian movement. It was a Christian movement.
Very good. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Do unto you.
And of course, Professor McKissack, let me thank you for that excellent information about and those insights in terms of the civil rights movement. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Cummings. And make sure that we have an opportunity, again, to talk to you in reference to some of these things. And we'll be with you again next week. Thank you and good morning.